Allow me to introduce myself. Rodney Skinner, gentleman thief.
Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, where I cover vampires, werewolves, and other supernatural creatures. I'm excited about this video because I finally get to talk about the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I don't know if I would classify this as a guilty pleasure, but I've always enjoyed this movie. It came out in 2003 and is based on the comic books created by Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill. The story is about a combination of heroes and villains from past comics and novels, assembled to defeat the villain known as the Phantom. Each member of the League has extraordinary abilities, some natural, some unnatural. Without further ado, let's look at the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, each member's unique abilities, and more. If you enjoy videos about vampires and other supernatural creatures, leave a like and subscribe for new videos every week.
Hold! In the name of the law! Ah!
The beginning of the movie introduces us to the main bad guy, the Phantom. Currently, he is kidnapping scientists from around the world, then having them develop weapons nobody has ever seen. The movie takes place in the late 1890s, but somehow he has already developed a modern tank and all kinds of other weapons. His goal is to terrorize the world with these weapons and then sell them to the highest bidder. He attacks the London bank, then kidnaps a bunch of German scientists. These attacks by the Phantom have caused unrest in Europe and a war is about to start. British intelligence has put together the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen to stop the Phantom. They're being assembled by a man named M. This isn't the first time a group like this has been assembled to save the world. The first person we see getting recruited to the League is Alan Quatermain, played by Sean Connery. He is living in Africa, which at the time is colonized by the British. An agent is sent to retrieve Mr. Quatermain, and at first we think it's this man. But then the real Quatermain is sitting behind him. He is quite famous and people often come to hear his stories. The real Alan has probably gotten sick of retelling these stories over the years, so he has this guy do it instead. At first, Alan has no interest in helping the British Empire, but the war arrives in Africa. They are attacked by some of the Phantom's men. He must somehow know they're trying to recruit Alan. It doesn't take long for us to learn what his ability is. After the gunfight, one of the Phantom's men get away, but the British agent says he's much too far to shoot. Alan lowers his gun, puts on his glasses, and immediately finds his target. Not only that, but he purposely only wounded the man so they could talk to him. Before shooting, he says, "Our friend might know something." That's Alan's special ability. He's a hunter and the best sharpshooter there is. He can hit a target at 1,000 yards with an iron sight. On top of that, we also learn there's a bit of a myth about him. People say that Alan is apparently indestructible. He once saved a village in Africa, and a witch doctor then blessed him and said Africa would never let him die. No one knows if it's actually true. It's more of a legend than anything. Before they can get any answers, the man poisons himself and dies. Both men survived the gunfight, but they didn't realize one of the men left a bomb inside the building and it explodes. Since Alan has been found by the Phantom's men, he agrees to join the League. They travel back to Europe to meet with M, and we get to meet some more members. The first person Alan meets is M, the man responsible for assembling the League. M is played by Richard Roxburgh, who plays Dracula in the Van Helsing movie, another one of my favorites. I'm not exactly sure why, but this movie has always reminded me of Van Helsing. M explains to Alan what the group is and introduces him to Captain Nemo. The captain is based off the character of the same name from the Jules Verne book 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. In the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, his story is a bit different. His true name is Prince Dakar. There was a large rebellion where he lived and he lost his family and kingdom. After that, he devoted his life to studying science and helping those in need. He developed a special submarine, known as the Nautilus, and that gives him control over the sea. In the film, he has other advanced pieces of technology as well. Captain Nemo is kind of the Batman of the group. He doesn't have any superpowers, but he's insanely smart, rich, and is proficient in combat.
Rumor has it that you're a pirate.
I'd prefer a less provocative title.
The next member we are introduced to is this guy. Do you see him? Well, probably not, because he's the Invisible Man, also known as Skinner. He's played by Tony Kern, who you might know as Marcus from Underworld or Snowman from Blade 2. A scientist developed a way to make himself invisible. In the comic, it was achieved by taking opium mixed with another mystery drug. This would turn the person's blood clear, making them invisible. Skinner is actually not the scientist who developed the procedure. The original creator died somehow, and Skinner stole the formula.
This is some parlor game.
Believe it.
In order to be invisible, he must be naked. Sometimes he uses face paint so we can see him. He's agreed to join the League because if they succeed, he's been promised a cure to make himself visible again. Okay, Emma's starting to sound like Calypso from Twisted Metal now. The fourth member of the League is Mina Harker. If you're familiar with the story of Dracula, you will know who Mina Harker is. She will be the team's chemist, and we'll learn more about her later. British intelligence knows the Phantom is responsible for the attacks in Germany and Britain. He's kidnapped more scientists and will be developing all kinds of weapons. The leaders of Europe will be meeting secretly in Venice. The group is meant to go there and stop the Phantom if he tries to attack. The meeting is in 4 days, so the group has to leave immediately. Plus, they have 2 more members they need to pick up along the way. When they go outside, we see an example of Nemo's advanced technology. It's 1899 and this guy already has a car, and it's probably in some ways more advanced than cars today. They drive to the next location and meet Dorian Gray. He is from a book called The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Dorian Gray has been featured in other movies and TV shows such as Penny Dreadful. Dorian initially declined the offer to join, but after seeing Mina, he reconsiders. They were once lovers, but had a falling out. We don't learn exactly what happened.
Mina?
Upon entering Gray's home, Alan notices there's a missing painting. This will be important later. Dorian says he still doesn't want to join, but Mina's presence intrigues him. Captain Nemo says everyone here has an ability. Quatermain a hunter, Mina a chemist, Nemo with his technology, even Skinner has stealth. What can Dorian do? He only says, I have experience. That's when Alan chimes in and says he has met Dorian before, at Eton College. Mina says, a lecture no doubt. You the nation's hero, Dorian the eager listening boy. She is trying to make it sound as if Dorian is still young, but Alan interjects and says, quite the reverse. Gray was visiting Eton, and I was the boy. The members share looks of shock, especially Mina, which is weird because she had a relationship with him in the past, but I guess she didn't know that he had supernatural abilities. This means that Gray has been alive for quite some time. If he was an adult when Alan was just a boy, and he still looks the same now, he must age very slow, or not at all. Just then, they are surrounded by gunmen. The Phantom steps out and introduces himself. He knows they have been gathered to stop him, and he can't allow that. He wants to give the group one chance to join him.
Join me.
You think we'll help start a war that will consume the planet?
None of them want to join a man that wants to start a world war. That's when one of the gunmen winks at Alan. This is actually American Special Agent Tom Sawyer. He was following them and knocked out one of the Phantom's men and took his place. He shoots at the other gunman and a firefight breaks out. And yes, Tom is based on the famous Tom Sawyer from Huckleberry Finn, although they don't have that much in common. He is very similar to Alan, basically being a sharpshooter. During the fight, we get to see a display of everyone's abilities. Skinner quickly removes his clothes and face paint, attacking people with anything he can find. Alan is showing off his impressive sharpshooting. It turns out Captain Nemo is extremely proficient in hand-to-hand combat. Finally, we have Dorian. He draws his sword and walks into the gunfight like it's no problem. He is very good with his sword, making short work of the Phantom's men. Unfortunately, one man with a machine gun empties an entire clip into his body. Well, I guess that's the end of Dorian. Except he continues on as if nothing happened. The man who shot him rips Dorian's shirt as he falls, and we see the dozens of bullet wounds healing instantly right before our eyes. Dorian does not bleed like a normal human. Instead, it looks like dust. After the fight, Skinner says, I thought I was special. You're invulnerable to damage. He doesn't seem to be any stronger or faster than a normal human. Just invincible. He's basically like Dracula from the Van Helsing movie. Completely unkillable. But of course, somebody like that has to have a weakness, right? Well, we'll get to that soon. Also, Dorian is played by Stuart Townsend, who also played Lestat in Queen of the Damned. This movie has a lot of crossover with other vampire media. Mina reappears after the fight is over. One of the Phantom's men was still alive and takes her hostage. This is when we get to see what Mina can do. She quickly spins around, grabbing the man, and then bites his neck, drinking his blood. The rest of the group is surprised because they also didn't know she was a vampire until now. After feeding, she tries to quickly regain her composure. This is when we are introduced to Tom Sawyer.
Boy, they told me European women had funny ways.
While everyone was fighting, Tom was chasing the Phantom. Unfortunately, he got away. America heard all about the attacks on Britain and Germany and wanted their own answers. He's been following them and wants in on the group. Alan seems a bit reluctant at first, but agrees to let him join. Before going anywhere, Alan wants to know what happened with Miss Harker biting that guy, and Skinner agrees they're quite curious. Mina is the wife of Jonathan Harker, the man who traveled to Dracula's castle in the original story. Mina says that Jonathan and herself, along with Professor Van Helsing, were fighting a great evil, Dracula. She was ultimately bitten and turned into a vampire. Since we only ever see her, it can be assumed that Jonathan and Van Helsing must have died. That explains why the group has been conducting most of their operations at night, although the original Dracula could walk in the day, so maybe she can too.
Together with a professor named Van Helsing, we fought a dangerous evil.
The next stop is Paris to recruit the 6th and final member of the group. Well, 7 now with Tom Sawyer. To get there, they will be taking Captain Nemo's ship, the Nautilus. When they first arrive on the dock, we can't see the ship, but suddenly it starts to rise from the water. And it's massive, probably a couple football fields long and very tall with ornate details. It's not only a ship, but a submarine that can travel deep underwater. The next scene, we are in Paris. There is some kind of huge creature running along the rooftops. They're shooting at him, trying to direct him into their trap. Sawyer's almost killed when the creature throws a large stone at them. They stop for a moment and Alan smells the air and says, he's afraid. I guess that means that Alan can smell fear, part of his amazing hunting abilities. We finally get a good look at him. Large angry creature with a top hat in Paris? It's Mr. Hyde. No, not that Mr. Hyde, that's Van Helsing. Although I love the voice of Robbie Coltrane, I think this version of Hyde looks better. He seems to be mostly practical, which is probably why. Alan displays some more of his shooting skill by making Hyde jump onto another roof and then shooting the tiles, causing him to fall. Once he hits the ground, Alan shoots a flare into the sky and a net comes down on Mr. Hyde. It then pulls him through the city 0 to 100 right into the ship. Must be some kind of invention by Captain Nemo. We then cut to being on the ship. All the crew members look nervous, and something is causing the ship to shake. All the group members arrive in the room to see that Hyde has been captured. He is huge, almost twice as tall as a normal human, and his arms are even bigger, almost making him look like a gorilla. Alan informs Mr. Hyde that even though he has committed horrible crimes in England, the Crown is willing to forgive him, if he grants them his services. Surprisingly, he immediately calms down and agrees. He can also speak quite well.
And I have been missing London so. Its sorrow is as sweet to me as a rare wine.
The crimes that the original Mr. Hyde committed are brutal. He will kill anything in his path and feels zero remorse. He's obviously from the famous story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Hyde tells them not to be afraid, and this happens.
Who says I'm afraid?
You stink of fear!
So I guess Hyde can also smell fear. What's with everyone being able to smell fear? Dorian says that's quite the parlor trick, and Mr. Hyde says, wait for my next one. Mr. Hyde begins to yell and flail around. He is transforming. There are sudden flashes, and we get to see the transformation go through multiple stages. Of course, this is the first transformation, so they go all out on the effects. There's some pretty horrific half transformations there. Kind of reminds me of Evil Ed from Fright Night when he was detransitioning from the wolf form. Finally, it's over, and Mr. Hyde has turned back into Dr. Jekyll. He was a kind doctor who suffered from terrible thoughts. He wanted to create a serum that would get rid of these thoughts, but what he ended up doing was making a potion that split his personality into good and bad. When he drinks the serum, he becomes his fully evil self. But it's not really him. It's truly like another person living inside Dr. Jekyll. In the comic books, Mr. Hyde actually started out small, even smaller than Dr. Jekyll. But over time, he has grown into this massive brute. Throughout the movie, we get to see how bad the Doctor's split personality is. While walking through the ship, we will see Mr. Hyde in reflective surfaces, sometimes even having conversations. Mr. Hyde tells him to take the formula. You know you want it. The Doctor refuses when suddenly Hyde appears and grabs him by the throat. He is snapped out of his delusion by Captain Nemo. He says, "Get your evil under control, Doctor. I will not have the brute loose on my ship." Yeah, that would be like a Hulk Avengers situation. The reflection thing also works in reverse. When Mr. Hyde is in control, he can see Dr. Jekyll in the reflective surfaces and talk to him. It really is two people sharing a single body. Also, this version of Mr. Hyde is not pure evil like the original. He has the ability to do good if he wants.
Dr. Jekyll, at your service.
We get to see another instance of Alan showing off his hunter senses. He's sitting at his desk when he suddenly turns off the light and we hear some fighting in the dark. When the light comes on, Alan is holding Skinner and tells him, "I want you wearing clothes at all times," and throws him out of his room. We also finally get an answer to why Dorian is immortal. During a conversation with his former lover Mina, he talks about the missing picture on his wall. It's a very special portrait of himself. He tells Mina, "Although it is my portrait, I doubt you would recognize the face upon it. Every year that passes, my portrait ages instead of me." Mina wonders when the last time he's seen it, and Dorian explains, "I dare not look upon it myself, or the magic of the painting would be undone." But how would he figure out looking at it would undo the magic? And what kind of magic is he talking about? Well, from what I read in the comics, Dorian sort of makes a wish in a moment of overwhelming pride, saying that the portrait shall grow old instead of him. And it just works. So the origin of this magic is unknown. Also, Dorian Gray is an extremely minor character in the original stories. He was added to the movie later, along with Tom Sawyer. While traveling to Venice to stop the Phantom, something is stolen on the ship. One of Dr. Jekyll's elixirs goes missing. He alerts the crew and suspects it was Skinner, but doesn't have any proof. After this, they don't see Skinner again, so it does look like he's guilty. They also find some mysterious powder on the captain's deck. The chemist Mina takes a look and says it's magnesium phosphorus. Maybe someone was trying to make an explosive. One other important thing that happens on this trip is a conversation between Tom and Alan. He is showing him how to improve his aim, because according to Alan, he shoots very American. Fire enough bullets and eventually you'll hit your target. Tom is curious as to why Alan was living in Africa, and we finally get an answer. He signed on to a mission for Queen and Country. His son joined the mission too, and unfortunately, died in his arms. After that, he wanted nothing to do with the crown and moved to Africa. Before he left Africa, we see a grave that says Quatermain. This is his son. The League finally arrives in Venice. Somehow, they know the Phantom will try to set off a bomb. One of the things the Phantom stole from the London bank was the architecture plans of Venice. That way he would know where to place the bombs. It's currently the carnival, so they must work quickly. They're going to deploy divers under the city to find the bombs. However, pretty much the second they step off the ship, multiple bombs start going off. Their plan is to get ahead of the chain of explosions and stop them. They hop in the car and tell Jekyll to get in, but he doesn't want to be used by Hyde and stays behind. During his conversation with Hyde earlier, he said, "I won't be tricked again." Maybe he's had a problem in the past of Hyde saying he will behave and then just wreaking havoc instead. Everyone except Jekyll gets in the car and tries to get ahead of the bombs. Like I said before, Skinner left after the elixir went missing. They begin driving through Venice and get ambushed by the Phantom's men, firing from the rooftops. Somebody must have tipped them off. But who? Dorian jumps out of the car to fight some of them. Sawyer tries to shoot at them but misses every shot. Finally, Mina says, "Save your bullets. These men are mine." She then jumps about 70 feet into the air and crawls up the building. She's also surrounded by a form of bats when in her vampire form. When going full vampire mode, she has fangs, extremely sharp nails, and grey skin. Mina is going Dracula Untold on these guys with the bats. She uses her swarm of bats to not only kill people, but to cover the car from fire.
The vampire lady has us covered.
While they're driving, Alan catches a glimpse of the Phantom, so he tells Tom to finish the job and he jumps out. You can't just jump out of a speeding car like that. I believe Dorian could do it, but old Quatermain, come on. Anyway, Tom needs to get in front of the buildings falling like dominoes and set off a flare. Then Nemo will lock onto the car and destroy that building, interrupting the chain of explosions. Thank God Nemo's car was built like a tank, because this thing gets put through hell. Sawyer manages to get in front of the destruction just barely and signals for Nemo. He fires the rocket and they stop all of Venice from being destroyed. Alan is now chasing after the Phantom. He finally catches up and the two begin to fight. Alan manages to knock the Phantom's mask off, and we finally get to see his face. Wait a minute, that's M, the guy who recruited them into the League. Quatermain throws a knife, hitting him in the back, but he still gets away. Upon returning, he breaks the news to the group. The Phantom is M. While they were gone, something was happening inside the ship. After Dorian jumped out of the car, he returned to the ship and killed the first mate. He also reveals that he was behind the ambush. Everyone returns just in time to see Dorian escape in the exploration pod with M. They quickly get onto the ship and chase after them. Not long after leaving port, they hear a strange high-pitched noise on the ship. One of the crew follows the noise and finds an audio recording. Dorian must have left a message before jumping ship. They play it right away and hear the voice of M. He says, "If you're hearing this, everything is gone according to plan." We hear Dorian's voice on the recording as well. He has been working with M the entire time. He admits the only reason he's helping M is because he holds something very dear to Dorian. The painting. That's how we got him to go along with the plan. Don't get me wrong, Dorian is not a good guy, but he probably wouldn't help M either. Dorian is very selfish and only wishes to help himself, so all he cares about is getting the painting. It turns out M has a grand plan that goes far beyond starting a world war. Once the war begins, he wants to have the ultimate weapon, the power of the League itself. M intends to create super soldiers with the same abilities as the League. Quartermain was used to capture Hyde. Then while on board the ship, Dorian put the plan in motion. He took a skin sample from the Invisible Man, some blood from Mina, and Dorian was the one who stole Dr. Jekyll's elixir, not Skinner. Well, that's not good. Remember that magnesium phosphorus that was on the ground? Well, that was from a camera. Dorian was photographing the ship. I wonder what he plans to do with that.
He's stolen us, and we let him.
One reason I think the movie wasn't a great adaptation of the novel and comic was they didn't give enough attention to M. I'm spoiling this a little early, but it will help you understand the movie better. M is the infamous James Moriarty, also known as the Napoleon of crime and the former arch-nemesis of Sherlock Holmes. He was recruited at a young age and would eventually become the head of British intelligence, all while running a crime syndicate. This ultimately leads him to assembling the League and trying to turn them into a weapon for his own gain.
Use his stratagem before the game is over. It is over.
While the audio recording is playing, we see Hyde in the reflection, and he seems to be in pain, telling Jekyll to turn it off. We don't know what this means though. Jekyll is confused and doesn't know what to do. Finally, at the end of the audio recording, M reveals that there is a high-pitched frequency being played from the record that will activate bombs. Nemo tries to smash the record player, but it's too late. Before leaving, Dorian also placed bombs all over the ship. They had crystals on them that would react to a certain frequency. Crystals, frequencies. M has been watching too much TikTok. That does explain why Hyde looked like he was in pain. Since he's more animalistic or something, he was able to hear the high-pitched frequency. As the bombs start to go off, the ship begins to plummet into the abyss. Their only chance is to pump the water out. Dr. Jekyll looks at the reflection, and Hyde says, "We can do this." Jekyll's a little hesitant, but decides he doesn't really have a choice and trusts him. He goes down below where they're sealing off the ship and jumps in. They seal the door behind him, and once inside, he drinks the elixir. He starts swimming toward the bottom, changing along the way. By the time he reaches the bottom, Hyde is fully out. He grabs the lever and has to pull it with all his might, but he does manage to do it, and the water is emptied out of the ship, and it comes flying back to the surface. This time, Hyde can see Dr. Jekyll in the reflection. The doctor congratulates him and says, "Good job, Edward." Okay, so Hyde's name is Edward? They still have to do repairs because the ship was damaged by the bombs, so they won't be able to catch Dorian and M. Just when it looks like they got away, they receive a message with Morse code. It's Skinner. He explains later that he went into hiding after the elixir was stolen because he knew they would think it was him. And he was right. Lucky for them, he managed to sneak onto the exploration pod with Dorian and M. He sends the coordinates of where they're going and says he will meet them there. The coordinates lead to the frozen lakes of Mongolia, nearly impossible to access by outsiders. The Nautilus bursts through the ice for a better look. They can see all the local villages have been abandoned. Captain Nemo presumes it was probably out of fear. After going ashore, they quickly find M's secret base and weapons facility. This is where he's keeping all the kidnapped scientists and their families.
M's summer retreat.
Skinner arrives shortly after and explains the inside of the fortress. Skinner was able to survive naked while in extremely cold weather, so he must have at least some resistance to the cold, possibly a side effect of the experiment on his skin. Below is the iron-making facilities for M's weapons. They are put together by a private army of men that share in M's beliefs. We see rows and rows of advanced tanks just like the one from the beginning, hundreds of armored suits with flamethrowers. But that's not all. Remember the pictures Dorian took of the ship? Well, M has built 8 of them so far. The scientists are forced to work night and day to recreate the powers of the League. Invisible spies, an army of Hydes, vampiric assassins. It seems they have already figured it out. because M is scheduled to leave today for Europe. He will be bringing a case of the chemicals to sell to the highest bidder. Their plan is to plant explosives in the furnace and blow up the building. Skinner will be in charge of placing the bombs. You know, since he's invisible. Jekyll and Nemo are going to free the prisoners. Mina will be dealing with her own beef and going after Dorian. Finally, Tom and Alan will handle M. And so the final battle begins. Mina turns into a swarm of bats and easily flies into the castle. Everyone else goes to their objective. At the same time, Dorian is getting ready to leave. He has his painting and wants nothing to do with M's plan, even though he invites him to stay. He said he's seen empires come and go. M's will be no different. He goes to his room to get his painting, and it's tied up so he can't see it. That's when Mina arrives. The two begin fighting, and they're pretty evenly matched. They both get wounded, and we see both of them heal instantly. So Mina's healing ability is also very good. During the fight, Mina sees the painting and is momentarily distracted. This gives Dorian a chance to stake her. Well, that's the end of Mina.
I hoped I'd get to nail you one more time. I didn't think it'd be literally.
Dorian is about to leave when Mina springs back to life and pins him to the wall with his own sword. While Dorian is still pinned to the wall, she grabs the painting, and Dorian begins to panic. He can't get the sword out, and Mina unveils the painting. The man in the painting is basically a skeleton. When Dorian looks at it, he begins to scream and rapidly ages like the guy from Indiana Jones. As Dorian ages, the painting is doing the reverse and looks good as new. You know, I was thinking, couldn't Dorian just close his eyes? I mean, he's indestructible, so there's no way they could kill him. Although, I guess Mina could have just destroyed the painting, and that would also probably kill Dorian. In the original comic, it was actually destroying the painting that killed Dorian. It had nothing to do with him looking at it, although I do kinda like that addition. The Dorian Gray from Penny Dreadful is kinda more like the original. He was able to look at the painting, and by looking at it, it would transfer the wounds from himself onto the painting. Anyway, back to the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. M is informed that the League has arrived and he is very angry. He was sure they died on the ship. Captain Nemo and Hyde are working on freeing the scientists. It surprises me how good Hyde looks. He's not perfect, but he looks real. Somewhere else in the factory, Tom is having a fight with someone who's invisible, but it's not Skinner.
What the hell are you doing here?
What makes you think I'm Skinner?
Tom manages to kill one of the flamethrower guys. Skinner helps save him, but in the process, he gets burned. He's invisible, but we can see his burnt skin because it's dead. Well, I guess he's kinda done for now. Tom is then taken hostage by the evil Invisible Man. Nemo's men are being slaughtered by M's advanced weapons, but they do manage to free everyone. Hyde is fighting a group of soldiers, and nearby is some of Jekyll's elixir that they recreated. Normally, Jekyll only drinks a small vial. This guy grabs a huge beaker and drinks it all.
Not the whole thing.
The man starts to violently transform into a grotesque version of Mr. Hyde, much bigger and stronger. He is throwing around Mr. Hyde like a rag doll, although he's still putting up a good fight. He calls for Nemo, and when the creature comes around the corner, he can't believe his eyes.
Nemo, run!
Nemo tries to do his best, but he's also knocked away effortlessly. He's too strong to fight. Mr. Hyde does say he's burning through the formula at an accelerated rate, but this never comes into play, so he might as well have not said it. This larger Mr. Hyde doesn't look nearly as good as the real Mr. Hyde. He's a weird red color and full-blown early 2000s CGI. If they could have made him look like a bigger version of Mr. Hyde, that would have been better. Even the Nautilus looks pretty good, but this guy is a bridge too far. I wonder if there's a limit on how much elixir you can drink. Can you just keep chugging and become Planet Buster Hulk? Finally, Mr. Hyde's elixir runs out and he turns back into Dr. Jekyll. Him and Nemo run for it and make it through a small opening that the creature can't fit through, but they're trapped. The creature grabs a giant icicle and is about to impale them when the bombs start going off. This causes the roof to collapse above the creature. He tries to hold the weight for as long as he can, but he is eventually crushed. Jekyll and Nemo then escape through a newly created hole in the wall. We got to see somebody use the Jekyll formula and be invisible, but we never got to see another vampire. I wonder if you could take all three chemicals at once and become an invisible Mr. Hyde with vampire abilities. I'm surprised nobody tried it.
End of the line, Moriarty.
Alan eventually finds M and begins chasing him down. Before they went into the factory, Alan said they must take M alive to discover his secrets. But as soon as they start fighting, he says you will not live beyond today. That I promise you. So which is it? Do you want to take him alive or not? Plus, Alan somehow knows that M is James Moriarty, even though that makes no sense. M says that James Moriarty died at Rickenbach Falls. He's referring to his face-to-face with Sherlock Holmes. M was thrown from the falls by Holmes and presumed dead. However, he survived and started building his new empire. If you're familiar with Sherlock Holmes, you will know how smart James Moriarty is. One of the few criminals Sherlock Holmes considers his equal. None of this is explained in the movie at all. At the end of the chase, Alan has M at gunpoint, and there's nowhere he can go. But then M says, "Are you sure Tom's ready for action? I think you've trained him about as well as your son." He holds up the mask of the Phantom. In the reflection, Alan can see Tom being held at knife point behind him. Alan could just kill M right now, but instead he spins around and shoots the evil Invisible Man. This gives M the chance to stab him in the back with the dagger. Now they've both got each other in the back. M suddenly turns into Batman and jumps out of the building with these wings. Tell me this music doesn't sound like Batman. M is on the run with the special chemicals to recreate the League. We know Alan is the best sharpshooter there is, so it shouldn't be a problem, right? Damn it, his glasses are broken. Looks like it's up to Tom. When they were on the ship doing some target shooting, Tom shot too soon. This time Alan tells him to take his time. Tom takes a deep breath, finds his target, and shoots. M is dead and the chemicals are destroyed. That's what I call getting two birds stoned at once. Tom says I got him and turns around in celebration, but sees that Alan is not looking good. Before dying, Alan says, "Let this new century be yours, as the old one was mine." That's the end of the legendary Alan Quatermain. The final scene of the movie is back in Africa. They brought his body back to be buried. They all say their goodbyes and Sawyer leaves his rifle on the grave. Nemo has spent a long time in hiding and wants to see the world now. The others agree and they all set sail on the ship together. I guess the legend of Africa not letting Alan die was just that, a legend. Wait, who's this guy? That's right. This isn't the end for Old Quatermain yet. The witch doctor begins to chant and the sky is covered with clouds. The dirt of the grave begins to shake and cut. I honestly think that was a pretty cool way to end the movie, to bring it full circle back to the legend of him being indestructible. Most likely, if they had left Alan's body in Mongolia or taken it to England, he would have stayed dead. But by bringing him back to Africa, he was saved. I wonder if this is the same witch doctor that originally blessed him or a different one. Alright, now I want to talk about who's my favorite and who's the strongest. For favorite, I'll probably have to go with Mr. Hyde. I like that his character almost brought a thriller aspect to the movie at times. The only jump scares in the movie are thanks to Mr. Hyde, and when I was younger he genuinely freaked me out. Imagine this guy bursting through your door. I also really like Mina Harker, of course. A nice change of pace having Mina appear as a vampire rather than Jonathan or Dracula himself. I also think Mina may be the strongest member of the League. She is immortal, has a very good healing ability, and as far as we know, can only be killed by a stake to the heart. She is presumably weak to sunlight, but we never see that, and it might not kill her. The original Dracula was not burned in the sun after all. She doesn't appear in mirrors, but nothing is mentioned about silver, crosses, or garlic. Dorian was surprised Mina didn't die on the ship. She says, "It's possible I can't die." Mina has considerable strength, speed, can turn into a swarm of bats, fly, razor-sharp claws, and who knows what else. Not to mention she's also a very intelligent chemist. Dorian is immortal, but doesn't have all the other abilities that Mina has. Dr. Hyde is extremely strong, but he's not immortal. That's why I think I would have to pick Mina as the strongest overall character. In the comic, Mina is actually the leader of the League, not Quatermain. Not only that, but she was the leader of a previous league and a future league known as the Seven Stars, which is much later in the series. Throughout the movie, she has a bit of a love interest with Tom Sawyer. There's a deleted scene from the movie where she shows in the end she was also falling for him. In the comics, Mina actually has a relationship with Alan, which is funny because in the movie they're at each other's throats the whole time.
This is nice.
Mr. Hyde.
That's my video on the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. My favorite member is between Hyde and Mina. Who is your favorite member of the League? Also, who do you think is the strongest? I think Mina is a pretty good pick. A lot of strengths and only one way to kill her. Second strongest would maybe be Dorian, just because he's impossible to kill. Dorian is also extremely cunning and smart, being the oldest member of the League. I might have to do a YouTube poll to see where the community really stands on this. I have to know. I enjoy this movie a lot, but I will admit there is something lost in this adaptation. If you know the comic book lore, then you can fill in the blanks of what's going on. But if you're like most people watching this movie, you have no idea who James Moriarty is or why he's important. They even mention his nickname, the Napoleon of Crime. But it's like, who's that? What? And how did Alan know who he was again? Who knows? He's probably met him before like Dorian Gray. But at least he tells us that. Like I said, I enjoy the movie, but I can see why critics disliked it. If you can see through the flaws, it's a very entertaining movie in my opinion. If you haven't seen it, definitely go watch it. And thanks to everyone that voted for this movie because I've wanted to cover it for so long. My next video is another series I've wanted to cover for a while, and I think you'll really enjoy. If there's any other movies or TV shows you want me to cover, please leave them in the comments below. I always read through them, and I'm always looking for new movies and series I haven't heard of. If you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't. It helps out a lot and I really appreciate it. As always, an extra big thanks to all my members for supporting the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.